Now the news. One man walked with a limp, talked with a limp, and thought with a limp, and noted, 3 out of 3 ain't bad. And by acclamation, the population proclaimed him king. And at the investiture, as the crown was being placed on the new sovereign's head, the high priest intoned, our redundancy, which once wert in heaven, holy shit, has now fallen down upon us. Have mercy, because after this, 3 out of 3 will no longer be sufficient. What greater sight for a man to behold than the recognition of a new ruler? The face-to-face meeting of man with his own thinking self. Here's the catch, thought one man. Every time the subject of seeking public office would arise, I wouldn't want to represent any constituency stupid enough to elect me. Which is what should be an alert man's attitude toward those thoughts in him which exercise dominance. There was once a vast open plain upon which men built a wondrous city, the likes of which there were none. And this singular construction project withstood all assaults, including that of time. It, in fact, expanded and became stronger with time. And though unrealized even by its builders and inhabitants, its strength and ability to grow was based on a baseless sense of its seriousness. All hail the mighty one to be hailed. All stand and pay homage as he enters our presence. All stand, that is, who can stand, which is always the components within a system, never the system itself. Did the universe wish to be aware of itself, it would have to make some planets therein themselves conscious. Have to make some planet therein itself conscious. And the lad asked his father, when I grow up, can I be a planet, please? In response to accusations that he continually lied and in specific made claims about himself that were untrue in the attempt to make himself look better than he deserved, one man said, as long as talk remains as affordable and significant as it is, that is, free and meaningless, then why not go for the best? The idea that honking can be abused as currency only among geese of severe mental limitations. And of your rights, I must take exception to the above, assuming that you intended it metaphorically. For man seems dumb enough, simply as he is, without you comparing him to an animal as stupid as a goose. I say, sir, you have gone a bit too far. Plus, even if you're justified in the comparison, then there would remain the matter of the geese being offended. Yours in Christ, etc. Since his thoughts wouldn't stand still for it, one man named his shorts. You ignorant bastards. Hey, what's the fun in life, he asked, if you can't have fun in life? And just then, as if on cue, they all bunched up on him. Not his shorts, you ninny. His thoughts. I think. The lives of individual men prove nothing, but since man lacks an understanding of life as a whole, he continues to speak as though they do. Failing the appearance of conclusive answers, the appeal of examples is irresistible. There was once a man who was two men in a specific way. One of him wrote about a certain thing, and the other one did the thing. Now it is true that everyone is two people, at least. But remember that this man, contrary to most, was two in a specifically identifiable manner, which qualified him to be driven around in a Pontiac. Second verse. There was once a man who was two men in a specific way. One of him wrote about a certain thing, and the other one of him did the thing. But contrary to everyone else, who were also two or more people, he eventually merged the two and became a Pontiac and drove himself around. Hint, don't let the simplicity of transportation throw you. As everyone learns in their first year of showbiz school, if you're axe bombing, go for sympathy. This is where all the religious prophets got the idea of being murdered in the middle of their performance. A knock on the monastery door. It's opened. There stands a young lad who announces, "I was sent here to sell Boy Scout cookies, and I hate cookies and have no interest in being a boy." And the one of the order who had opened the door says, "Yes, you're in the right place. Come on in." The ordinary have a totally different attitude toward death than others, which is why they take such care to dress up a corpse in good clothes and put it away in an attractive box. While those who know what the filling in the cookie really is have no interest. No, better said, have the proper interest in the physical trappings of routine life and death, which in their view is to say the trappings of life and pseudo-life, which among the ordinary passes for demise and exit. Remember what you were taught. If you're axe bombing, go for sympathy. One father suddenly pulled this pop quiz on his son. What's the difference between baboons jockeying for position in a pack and men doing so in the intellectual realm? And the lad, realizing this to be a non-trick question, replied, "In one of the two instances, something of actual value is at stake." And the old man was so delighted to the response that he backed up over the kid's foot in a Firebird. Alleged and commonly believed accident report. As it sped by, voices coming from one planet could be heard to say, "Yeah, we're all pretty beat up in here." At King's Court, the new physician had this prescription: laugh. And if that doesn't work, whine. But be sure that you're laughing when you do it. The knights of one ancient secret order could recognize one another anywhere in the world, wherever they went, by the fact that each of them was a simplistic, insincere type person. On purpose, of course. The simple believe that we're all on our way to destruction, while the more civilized hope and trust that we're on our way, in spite of ourselves, to a better day. And those who know the truth about life are just pleased to get out of the way as much as possible and let life do its thing with as little of the spillover hitting them as they can manage. A more conscious mentality sees the mental world of ordinary man similar to how one on land would view those who believe themselves constantly struggling to stay afloat amidst a worldwide flood. And need I say that everyone, routine and otherwise, are on dry land. Even those who only imagine that they want to travel would likely be irremediably stopped from even trying to begin, were they to know in advance what the great quest is not about actually going somewhere, but rather about a new understanding of the position you presently hold. It is for children that the miraculous must be material. Man discovered law firm. Name of chicanery and deceit. Turned out to be his own thoughts at work. Spatial considerations limit physical efficiency. Time, mental. The battle cry of one nightly order was, "Let me out of here," which was followed by the response, "Out of where?" which was followed by the reply, "Here," which was followed by the question, "When?" which in turn was followed by the word, you know what it was. Men invented days of multiple hours and many minutes upon realizing what the initial simplicity of physical time might result in were it to directly move into place in his burgeoning mental world. If this at first seems unclear, just wait a couple of hours and it'll probably get worse. One man's latest observation regarding a certain aspect of man. Being a creature of habit has to be the supreme example of something that can be either most excellent or a real drag. Just because something will get the job done doesn't mean that everyone wants it done that way. Based on their aim, the view of the few is that if you did not knowingly intend that a particular thing occur, then it didn't, even if it did. Still, as always, the in-your-face, cut-your-throat distinction between those who really want to be and those who settle for what they seem to be. Since everyone feels captive, how come no one's sharp enough to ever wonder who that leaves to be holding us captive? A dad told a lad, you can usually tell that you're onto something if your own thoughts say, I don't want to think about it. Long ago and far away was once a hamster who was placed in a treadmill wheel and who worked at it so vigorously that its thighs became the size of baseball bats, and who finally jumped off and beat the crap out of the people running the lab and split for parts unknown. And a lass said to her mom, when I grow up, I want to be and was stumped as to whether to say a hamster, lab, or baseball bat. But nonetheless, her mother understood the passion behind the hesitant words. Okay, since we've already parked in this space once this evening, why not again at a different angle? More precise accident report. From the view within a closed system, there is no such thing as murder, only suicide, which from an even more detailed vista is just another word for attrition, which itself is just a fancy-antsy 9-letter symbol for potting soil. And of your rights, when you continue to say things such as you just did, is it any wonder that viewers like me wonder whether you mean what you say to be taken seriously? Wait a minute, he suddenly injects. What if what you're talking about is meant to be applied to one's own mental processes? Hey! Whew. Never mind the first part of the letter. Yours sincerely, over and out, bye, forget what I said about anything, bye, yours, etc. Once you fully realize that life is alive with its own genetics and that we're an internal part thereof, all matters regarding the environment become foolish to the extreme. How to spot check whether you're still a fool or not. Do you still try and talk to other people? Seriously? Be sure and tune in next time when we'll learn how to change our own oil. Once upon a time, long, long ago, a man sought out and gained entry into a secret mystical order. And after having been there for a considerable number of years, being exposed to all of their teachings, methods, and approaches, he finally gained an audience with the seldom seen and never social head of the order. And as soon as they were face to face, the man demanded to know, but what if, in my case, it is the transmission fluid that needs changing? Even amidst the best and brightest of earthquakes, monsoons, and volcanic eruptions, they still cannot come to a scientific certainty as to why humans are never satisfied. And of your rights, do you perchance have a non-standard definition of what is serious and what is not? Doesn't everybody? I'm sorry. Shouldn't everybody? All possible solutions from the mind come in twos or multiples of two, which never result in satisfaction. More expansive view remains, as always, the odd man out. In an invented world of ills, it is not nice, feasible, or profitable for one therein to realize why invented cures work. According to never-released secret mystical records, there once was on this planet a truly enlightened man. But he died. Now chill out. In man's mental world, nothing is ever more than it seems, and often less. On this planet, man is the sole creature with a describable inner life, and one which must be continually propped up by being continually described. There was once a man who said, when you've heard one metaphor, you've heard them all. But he only said that after hearing all the world's metaphors and then realizing that they're all the same one. A visitor asked a mystic's phone, "How come you don't have a man?" Communication is always the key. Unless, of course, you know what's behind the door and have no interest in it. In which case, the ability to tell someone from afar to get lost is of less pressing importance than it was when you worked on the gym assembly line. So a visitor asked a mystic's car phone, "So how come you ain't got an Oldsmobile?" There was once also a world on which the only way to permanently die was to become permanently serious about being alive. As the ship seemed in danger of going down, which was just an illusion, but one endemic to all sailing, the captain took to the bridge and valiantly announced, "The ship seems in danger of going down." And all of the sane, ordinary passengers on board raised a mighty cheer. For what reason? Hey, what can I tell you? Sailing's a funny game. There was also a world in which the thinking creatures had a notion of a higher state of mental activity than one that they were born with. But they believed that to achieve it, you had to leave that planet. When he finally realized that all language, whether intentional or not, is by its very nature metaphorical, one man quickly thereafter recognized that language and thought are inseparable, which introduced a whole new description of thought itself as being merely metaphorical. Upon accomplishing all this, the man sat down and said, "Phew, what a relief!" One follower of proceedings such as this was so subsequently struck. If a man could hold secure and constant his attention to mental decisions he had made, he could reach enlightenment, become awakened, or even be a real Christian, Jew, Buddhist, or Muslim, or just live a good, guilt-free, non-denominational life. Upon realizing this, he was surprised at how simple it suddenly seemed. And as long as we're in this neighborhood, perhaps you'd care to note that simplicity is one of life's more commonly used camouflages. And if metaphors remain external, they remain metaphors and thus useless. And finally, here's the setup from one more angle. The simple don't take words seriously enough, relatively speaking, while the more civilized take words too seriously, relatively speaking, which leave those who know what's really going on, who normally take their words to go rather than eating them here or wherever they are. Another hint, the complexities are in seeing words as food, while the awakened mastication thereof reveal the entire matter to be of simplicity itself. Though attentive parents will caution their children not to physically choke, the opportunity is generally not taken to warn them of similar mental dangers. And as he finally lay in his self-made dying bed, a mystic's last words were, "I don't want to talk about it." I had my whole life to do that. A sure sign of those who know is that they know when to shut up. And if your rights is when now, you got it. I want to mention something that perhaps some of you out in radio land have never heard. I made up some time back a word to represent something that is not normally discussed, not normally seen, and the word I made up was metavesco. And what it represented is something in practice quite well known to humans. Tacitly, but experientially known. And that is, in some cases, we'll start off in a reasonable manner, if that's what you want. In some cases, mere attention to a so-called problem seems miraculously somehow to cure the problem. This is nothing new, and I don't want any of you who are hearing it for the first time to get misled that it is otherworldly and that I am on some obscure frequency yet. It's early. We just started. People know, and if you have any doubt, let me just give you one or two examples and you'll know exactly what I mean, but it is never discussed in any direct manner, that it is known probably to every person on this planet how it is that, let's take it physically, that they have some pain that they have that seems intent on not taking a powder of its own volition. It keeps hanging on. The person complains about it, and they express, and they finally get talked into, well, at least go to the doctor and see it. Could be serious. And they finally go, all right. There are all sorts of variations of it, but one is you just call up, the person calls up and gets an appointment. Has to go through wherever it is. It's going to be a week, 2 weeks, what time of day. Finally, they get the appointment. And shortly thereafter, almost sometimes upon hanging up the phone from making the appointment, the complaint disappears. That the only attention in this case given was to make an appointment. And if you don't want to see it physically, if you really want to stretch it, it's also not unknown for this to happen with the one's Pontiac. Very, very many people know the humiliation of having your car act up on you that has a pain, and you keep stalling it off for whatever reason, perhaps fiscal considerations, but finally it gets so noisy, so bad, that you stop in to see a mechanic, and you tell him what's wrong. And he said, well, crank it up. I've never heard anything that sounded that bad. And you crank it up, and the son of a bitch is as quiet as a sleeping possum. That just going there seemed to have cured it. These, if they were pointed out, as I said, everyone knows what I'm talking about by now. They are simply seen as somewhere between fairly amusing anecdotes, and if taken at all momentarily with a more serious view, are seen as some sort of anomalies in life. Quirks. I mean, yeah. People have tried to, as I'm sure all of you know, even make mystical, metaphysical, religious systems based upon these kind of quirks. But what is not seen is this, and also I should point out, or will point out, that the closest probably of any description that would match my metavesco, and they do not, none of these terms are expansive, adequately expansive to cover what we're going to talk about. But it is probably the closest in ordinary vernacular, it would be the placebo effect. I can't think of anything that's known out in the ordinary community of man verbally that is any closer. And that is, again, a phenomenon that is well known, well established. People have gotten their degrees, their postgraduate degrees, writing on the placebo phenomenon. Probably best known, or at one time in psychology, and now it's well known in the general field of medicine, but as simple, as straightforward as it may seem to be when looked at the anecdotal or the exemplary level from person to person, case histories, they still can come to nothing resembling a conclusion. But that is, I assume you all know, it's the placebo effect that under strict, oh my God, under strict laboratory conditions, they can hand out to a group of select volunteers a new medicine, some medication of some sort, to one half of the group, and the other half are given placebos, commonly sugar pills, to see what effect. And there are all kinds of variations of this. It's not much more than rats and mazes, except in this case, whoever it was managed to round up some humans rather than rats. But there are several variations they do. One is to not tell them anything, which is the least popular one, by the way, because it produces the least discernible results. It helps. It helps to tell all concerned. Say you got 100 patients who've got some sort of complaint like sleep. They have trouble sleeping, let's say. And they'll get 100 people, volunteers, and they'll tell all of them that they have a new Sephoric, a new sleep-inducing drug, sleep enhancer, that they won't try out, but they tell them up front. Say, now half of you are going to get the drug, the one that we have some faith in, but we're still in the testing stage. It's safe, but half of you are going to get it. We're just doing it at random, and half of you will get placebos. That's always good, because then you'll get some kind of goddamn result out of them. But if you don't tell them anything, you should know how people are. Someone in authority, they bring them back in. If they just get 100 people and say, we've got some, if they got 100 people that say they have sleep difficulties, and they bring them in, a man in a coat and a degree, and a tire changer around his neck, or whatever doctors wear, or whatever that thing is, a tar iron. That's what doctors wear down in Alabama. No, that's not it. A tar iron is what a guy in Alabama uses to put a rubber on, but that's another story. That's way off the subject. Well, thank God I didn't say that's what doctors in Alabama used to put a rubber on. Or worse yet, that that's what proctologists do not. No, I don't. Never mind. If you just took 100 people who said that they had sleep problems, and you said, well, we have this new drug, and we're going to hand it out and see how it works, it's too hit or miss. And plus, if they say, we'd like for y'all to come back, we're giving you $10 and a free meal every time, and we want you to come back in 2 weeks, and they come back in 2 weeks, and it's this authority figure. Man's still in his white coat, and he goes, well, what happened? People will say something. They said, did it work? At any rate, the placebo effect, back when it's working at its most efficient, that is from the tester's view, when they'll get something resembling a straightforward response. If they tell them beforehand that half of you are getting sugar pills, placebos, and half of you are getting actual sleep inducers or enhancers, when they come back and they question them, there is no assurance whatsoever, contrary as a matter of fact, that the number of people, the percentage, the group of people who will say that they have benefited, that they sleep better, there is nothing predictable and no substantial belief that those who claim to have been helped will absolutely parallel once it's checked, and they keep a secret number so they won't know to start with. But the number of people who actually receive the drug is not necessarily by any means the ones who will come back and say that they have benefited, which is another way to say that many of those who receive the sugar pills will come back later and say, God, when this is over, I have got to have that prescription. I have never slept so well. This is nothing new. It's known as far back as there's recorded history almost. Greek, I keep using them since I assume most of you are Greek rather than Chinese. I don't know why I make that assumption. So I keep using Western history rather than Eastern history, or Eskimo history, which is obvious most of you would even be more in the dark. And not just because of the latitude and angle of the sun. But you had Greek dramatists who were their own version of psychologists writing about such things. Psychosomatic illness and apparent cures thereof, which is the placebo effect, in a sense. At any rate, this is nothing new. So we've had several thousand years of anecdotal, literary, philosophical, dramatic, and now scientific. Scientific. You see that, don't you? Scientific investigation of the matter. They continue to come back, the 100 people, and God knows which percentage, how many of them that got the sugar pills. The 50 who got the sugar pills will come back insisting, sane, ordinary, educated people insisting that it has made a dramatic effect, and it did from the first night. And they go, Of course, usually as I said, the testers and those ones in the survey will not even know, so that they won't react at all. But then after they get down the numbers of the people, and then they open it up to see who actually got. and they look, they continue to be. They continue by their own description to be sorely, or at least mildly, astounded. Nonplussed in a scientific sense. That is, they cannot figure how can these reasonably sane, educated, sophisticated, world-wise people take sugar pills and come back in here, popping up and down, bopping around, claiming that they have got to have the prescription for this. They cannot even wait for it to get out of the experimental stage, and all we gave them was nothing. How can this be? And of course, then somebody tries to write a paper on how can this be, and somebody says, well, they've already done a paper on that, and they go, wait a minute. All right, then how about a paper on those who continue to want to write papers on how this can be? How can it be that they don't know there's already been papers on that? And the president of the college, the head of the doctoral board, even they sometimes go, what? But oftentimes it is so confusing, and they got other things to do, teas to attend, fundraisers. They go, all right, write it on that, and they walk out having no idea what they agreed to. No one can explain. Let's take it to this. Let's chase it to the cut. No one can explain the placebo effect. And as I said, that does not adequately cover it. If you see why I backed up for it, is still I want you to understand, to see that I am not speaking in some spooky, otherworldly manner. What I'm talking about is every day. It happens to everyday people. It has happened to everyone, probably more, well, it has more than once, whether you can recall it or not, that your mere attention given to something seemed to cure the something. If it was a problem, it seemed to give the solution. If it was an ill, it seemed to have cured the ill. Just investigating it. And it is by no means, why I said more than once, even whether you have been aware of it or not, it does not have to be to the level of something as serious as a noise in the front end of your car or some pain you have in your body. There are many things that people that are so minuscule, that seem to be so small in their general frame of reference, that people, and I hesitate to even try to think of an example. I'm just going to leave this to you. You're doing it constantly, the mind is. That there appears to be little things. Again, you might not even classify them as being problems, not in the sense that I have a pain, but they're little things that you're continually confronted with in life that at first strike one at a non-analytic level is being curious to the point of that almost stops you in the midst of what you're doing, just momentarily. But then it's like you just look at it, and whatever the question was, whatever the uncertainty was, is just gone. And you just press on. Rather than me give an example, let me put it this way. Men unwittingly, continually have this awareness that they are ignorant sons of bitches and have no idea what they're about to do. But then just being aware of that seems to make it all right, and you press right on. Don't write me, viewers. Don't write me. If you don't understand that, then you are a prime example of what I just spoke of. There's only one sure, well, there is one sure, inescapable way of the absolute unconditional determination that you are a dyed-in-the-wool idiot, a fool, el stupido. That is, to have any description made about man's stupidity, and you personally have any doubt as to whether you understood what was said. Case be closed. There is no appeal court to that. Why cannot Medivesco be recognized? Why, in some manifestations, such as the medical acknowledgement of the, quote, placebo effect, even when it is to some degree recognized? Again, I repeat, the full dynamics of the Medivesco is not recognized, but even when aspects of it are, then why can it not be seen? Why can it not be understood that it works? Why can't that be accepted? And then why cannot they even get one step close to why it works? Or if you prefer, how it works. If I have long enough, we can take it both ways. Why is it that men cannot see, without lapsing into very open-ended, always inconclusive discussions such as the placebo effect? Because the mind, as always, cannot come to a satisfactory conclusion, given anything based upon twos or multiples of twos. That either placebo The placebo effect, well, it's simple, they would say. It either works or it doesn't work. And we know damn well it didn't work. I mean, it's sugar pill, and yet it worked. Whew. You got two choices. Anything that arises from the mind, any solution, any possible answer to anything that comes to the mind is always, it comes in possibilities of two or it's multiples of two. If you get real fancy, or sometimes if we have time, it's no big deal, sometimes the mind can see more than two solutions, the ordinary mind. That's when you're real sophisticated. That's when you have run your ordinary thought through a Vegematic or something made by Poe Peel. You get really sharp, you can get beyond two. But don't be an idiot and go 3. Minimum of 4. You can go from 2 to 4. And some people, it's been known, it's of no importance, but there have been several people, they did themselves irreversible physical brain damage because they're ordinary people that tried to take it one time to 6. There's several, they don't make history books, but I know of several examples out in the ordinary world in the last 3,000 years, more or less, of men who have attempted to push the possibilities that the mind could come up with of answers, cum solutions to any question or problem they may have, that have pushed it, tried to 6, but it's a sight you do not want to see. That is the aftermath of the condition in which the poor people found themselves. Plus their family had to pay the state to look after them and lock them up. Why cannot the mind see metavesco? Let me make it real simple. Let me just make statements now. It is not imagination. It is not based upon psychosomatic ills. It is not due to stupidity. It is not due to any reason. That is, of a reason being an explanation as to why this works or why it's an anomaly. Metavesco, that is the attention to problems, can absolutely cure problems. Now let's take it from there for a second, for the sake of what I'm saying. If we accept that as a workable platform, that is a basic fact from which to grow the rest of this, that if the so-called placebo effect that ordinary men can witness, that they can put within the range of statistical expectation, that scientists, educated people will say there is such a thing, although we don't understand it and we hate to say that it exists, but the manifestation of it exists, that is the placebo effect. There are things that you can do to people, like such as give them sugar pills with the least bit of hint that it might work, and it will in many cases. So they acknowledge that it's there. Well, in the same way that so-called scientists will acknowledge that something seems afoot, something as yet not totally explainable in so-called areas as faith healing or voodoo, that men of science will witness someone go in who, by all accounts, has not been able to walk for 10 years, or has some malady somewhere out in a less civilized area, and some shaman or some witch doctor come in and throw down, a bucket of fog, wave some frog hips over the person and do some kind of chant, and the person gets up and walks. And of course, scientists look at that and they look at one another. You always look silently. If you don't know, if you've never seen scientists, that is anybody who's dealing with the mind confronted with something that is absolutely unexpected and inexplicable to them, they always, there's one reason that intellectuals, scientists always run in twos if you never thought about it. Usually it's one of them will have the binoculars or the stethoscope or the tire iron, and the other one will have a clipboard. Like one of them's in charge of observing and one of them's, that's not why. They run in pairs because of what I'm about to tell you, is because of the possibility of running upon something that is inexplicable, and they need the time, they need another like mind, they need a peer, they need another scientific educated person with them so that they can take that momentary, that's always there, that momentary quiet pause when this unexpected, inexplicable phenomenon occurs that these two scientific observers, as good intellectuals, do. It happens, and at first they quietly look at each other. See, but what you don't know is, what nobody ever thinks about, is what that time is not them pondering, not them trying to come up with a new theory, not them trying to picture a new model by which to explain this. What they're doing is looking off and thinking, what in the hell am I going to say about this? What in the crap is this? They didn't teach me this at Harvard or the University of Nashville. Night school. They can see, it is well known that they have observed, this was just a sidebar about faith healing. It's denounced, or if it's not absolutely rejected out of hand by those not interested in it, those not involved with it, as I was calling it, scientists, they will simply see it as another, if it does seem to have some effect, it is simply another phenomenon, another manifestation of the placebo effect. That's all they can say. That in some way the person was so affected that a preacher or witch doctor went and did some kind of thing. They beat drums and got everybody kind of in a trance, maybe slipped something in their coffee or Ovaltine. And it was just the power of suggestion. Well, forget the drugs. They'll see it when they cannot see any sort of physical intrusion into the patient. But it just seems to be that the witch doctor or a minister or someone goes, oh, be healed. And they call upon the gods in some way, is cure this poor person. Cure them of their malady. And it's not unusual at all for people who did not walk, people who said they were deaf, for people who were blind. Their whole family was there and said, yes, he's been blind since birth. And for somebody somebody with no credentials, no background, somebody doing, from a scientific mood, just absolute hocus pocus nonsense, and the person suddenly goes, wow, and they can see. And they walk off thinking, oh boy. And it just goes, and people who are not interested in it, they look at that and they go, what in the hell did I just see? The best they can do is dismiss it or explain it as a variation of the placebo effect. And then, if they've got, nowadays, any good intellectual would have this. I started to say if they were so inclined a bit further, which they would be nowadays, they would say that without any doubt, so would say a person. If they said, I cannot explain what we have just seen totally, but there is no doubt about one thing. We have the placebo effect at work. And perhaps a bit more specifically, I can say this without fear of contradiction. There was a psychological power at work vis-a-vis the person in authority, the witch doctor, the minister, whoever it was staying in that position of authority. The person came there seeking help. And this minister, someone doing hocus pocus, magic, is already placed themselves in a position of authority. As long as you play along with it. They are an authority figure. That you come there, will you help me? I'm blind, or my son's blind, would you heal him? You're in connection, you're in touch with the gods, and we're not. The minister, the rabbi, priest, somebody goes, I'll be glad to, I'll do my best. And they do whatever it is, hold the little boy's eyes or do something, and the boy can see. The best they can say, the closest, and to them this sounds like, at least we're on scientifically good footing. That we're on the way to an explanation. That what's at work here is a well-known effect, say they, that an authority figure can have a kind of psychological impact. And then they can start pointing out tyrants and times of history when whole groups of people seem to have gone mad because of one man going, ah! And it was like this people suddenly became hypnotized and did absolutely foolish things, unbelievably foolish things. They say, there it is. And here's a manifestation. Not that the minister perhaps has any evil intent, they might say, but it was a psychological effect. Because we know damn well we're men of science. If you cannot see, or if you're lame, if you're absolute that way, talking to a lame muscle, talking to retinas that are unattached, talking to them will not put them back together. Now we know that, they say. We know that for a fact. So, if this child can now see, whereas he was blind, or can walk, whereas he was previously lame, then it is not based upon a scientific phenomenon. That is, it's not a physically, scientifically explainable phenomenon that the retina grew back. Of course, nowadays, sometimes they go and do x-rays and find out that the son of a bitch did grow back. which of course doesn't help them at all, except you've got a new basis for a new paper. Well, which sounds like progress, but all they're saying is, wait a minute, we've got even more that we don't understand here. But nobody sees it that way. It looks like, well, now we're getting somewhere, because there's less we understand about this same phenomenon about which we couldn't explain, or which we couldn't explain before. But now there's even more to it than we imagine that we can't explain. Stay tuned for further developments and how to change your own oil. They cannot see, back to what I was going to say, except for a moment, at least for the sake of this intellectual or verbal interlude. I didn't mean to say intellectual, this verbal interlude. Hey, let's not be pushy. I wouldn't call this intellectual. I'm afraid if I did, intellectuals might actually show up and go, hey, which a lot of times they'll take up your parking place anyway if too many of them show up. Well, maybe not yours, but some of the reserved ones, because intellectuals, they'll go, well, I am handicapped. So there you are. That's another story, and probably well that we don't have time to even stick our proboscises therein. Take it that what ordinary life is always accepted as being transient appearances of anomalistic inexplicables, the placebo effect of things happening that by all appearances did happen, and yet they cannot happen in the world of man. We're not talking about flying saucers and all that crap, but what I'm just describing. They see it as anomalies. I am telling you that constantly. I'm telling you that throughout the day, you are attending to, and by that I mean the full sense. I hate to say cure or even treat, because the mind wants to latch onto that. Attend to. All of you are linguistically and mentally sophisticated enough, I will assume, that attend to, by connotation, can mean more than just necessarily look at. Attend to, in a wider connotation, attend to, here I'm about to compare it to the very things that I resisted saying, is almost to cure something. Well, you've heard the term. Somebody will point out, well, your garden needs, it's being overrun by weeds or something. And a person will say, well, I'll attend to it. What they mean is that it's their intention to alleviate, to cure, to rectify, to undo whatever problem, or to answer whatever problem has been just mentioned. I'll attend to it. The human mind, the minds of ordinary men cannot see that what I'm calling metavesco, a full attending to problems, happens continually in a man's mental life. Now remember, we're talking about a mental life, even though I use examples of ills of the body that oftentimes, where it's not unknown for an apparent ill, a pain in the body, to go away once you've made a doctor's appointment. But it is not, we're not speaking of the body, because I assume that you know something else rather than just a physical ill is at work. Because an ordinary person, that could call up a physician and make an appointment after weeks of having a certain kind of headache, let's just say. And then, once they do it, or they've been spitting up blood or something, and they call the doctor, and shortly thereafter, the symptoms stop. That is not the same that if you cut off your finger, or cut it to where it's just hanging on by a few strands, that you can let it hang there. We're talking about now something that is obviously or describably a strictly physical phenomenon. Metavesco very seldom, I must say, hardly ever works under those said conditions. That just by finally going, well, I believe I'll call the doctor. Now that that thing that used to be in my finger, it's black now and it's hard as a rock and it's just still hanging. Calling a doctor then, it's very iffy as if that's going to have any salubrious effect on said ill. But somewhere there's short of that. You understand, we're talking about the world of man, and even though I use a body for an example, what I said was it goes on continually beyond man's notice is this, and now it is almost entirely describable in man's mental world. That is, that you are continually, mentally, not physically, Your body doesn't feel it this way. But you are continually mentally and unknown to the mind. It does not notice it. Is continually in situations wherein it is ill. I previously called it uncertain. You don't know what to do next. You feel stupid. You realize you don't know what to do. That maybe you're with somebody can be very specific, and it could be in circumstances that might appear to be quite pressing, even physically dangerous, potentially. And another person, there you are, and some other person, let's say, goes, my God, what do we do now? And you can tell that they're more frightened than you are. Maybe you're the older, maybe you're a man, or trying to be, and it's a woman or a child. They go, well, what do we do now? You go, wait a minute, well, don't panic yet. Here, you're with me. Of course, you're panicked. That is, in the sense, you do not know what to do next. They go, what do we do next? You go, well, wait a minute, don't calm down a minute. That's kind of like you and the two scientists. You're going, calm down. Because what you're doing, what the hell am I going to do? But you go, hey, calm down. It is a moment of uncertainty. And as I said, it can be serious. It could be something that was potentially physically threatening. And you actually, momentarily, do not know what to do. And I mean literally. You do not know what to do, and you're aware. I might as well be a kid. I might as well be deaf and dumb and blind. I might as well be a buzzard here. I got no idea. I mean, I normally strut around. People have this little feeling. But it's like, it could be just, you were just playing whatever role it is. You're da-da-da. And suddenly something happens that tears apart or rips the fabric of where you imagine you're standing in the scenario. That there I was playing, whoever you were, attorney, priest, psychologist, debonair, hip person, and I suddenly execute an unforgivable intellectual faux pas. And there you stood, thinking everything was going great, swimmingly well. You're impressing women, potential business associates over here. And suddenly, you verbally, or perhaps pass ill wind. You do something, and just that fast, it's like your whole world fell apart. What do I do now? People know what to do now without knowing it. All the mind has to do is just become aware, which it normally isn't, become aware of the present circumstances in a way that damn near resembles being more enlightened or awake. Because for one of the few times in people's lives, one of the few times, is when they do find themselves on such, not physically, but on such uncertain ground that they feel as though all my roles, everything I normally do, that is, and they won't put it this way, hey, I normally stumble through life, asleep, in a coma. What happened? What went wrong? My coma let me down. Does that? Well, good. I was going to say, does anybody get it? Do you see? It's just the opposite. Ordinary people, their feeling, if they had to describe it, was I was covered in chagrin that I did not know what to do. That's one of the closest times that ordinary minds come to any sense of true individual consciousness is at such time. They could never explain it this way or analyze it. But what it amounts to is, hey, I normally stumble around. I'm sleepwalking. I'm in a dream. I'm in a coma. As far as calling me conscious, it's a laugh. Ha! And not a funny one. And what they're actually saying is, my coma let me down. What happened? That's the closest they are to ever being what the mystical tradition refers to as conscious or awake or enlightened. Do you follow? So it's just then. They apply medivesco. They give attention to the very thing to which they never give attention. And just by giving attention to it, what does it do? Help them? Not from our view. It puts them back in their regular position. It puts them back asleep. It puts them back at the ordinary level of consciousness just by momentarily being aware of the fact that my ordinary reptilian state, hypnotic, catatonic state of consciousness let me down. Damn! How could this happen? That's all it takes. You applied medivesco to it. What I was going to get at was a wider sense, since it's easy to threat. Maybe I'll pick it up next time. It's when you're inside of a game. The world of man, let's call it the thought game. It's civilization. It's everything that could be for the sake of conversation, described in an ad hoc manner as anything, any activity, any interest man has that is not directly, immediately, survival-based, which is all of civilization. Education, arts, religion, the whole output of man's mind. Let's call that the thought game, which is what it is. As long as you're inside that game, as long as your consciousness is in the thought game, where it was born and where it's supposed to just stagger through, as long as you're within that, the idea that all of the ills, all of the questions, all of the uncertainties, let's say all of the ills and the problems that are extant in the thought game, as long as you're in the game, you can never see metavesco for what it is. You can never see why or how invented cures work on invented problems. The reality of what I'm calling metavesco cannot be seen if I tried to get ordinary minds. If I tried to hold a man's ordinary mind, a good, sane, educated man, and somebody could grab his mind and said, look, you dumb son of a bitch, look at what I'm describing. You have lived it. It goes on continually. That just mere attention to problems, to serious problems and questions, mere attention continually cures it. If I tried to make him see it, he would still be left. If he finally said, well, let me go, if I'm choking his mind. He might agree to anything, but he would never leave. It's not possible for him to leave and realize, even if he said, yeah, I know what you mean. The placebo, shut up, don't call it the placebo effect. He'd go, okay, I see it. But he would still think, yeah, I've heard of that. But if you tried to make the mind see that in the whole world of the thought game, there are no such thing as real problems. If there are real problems, they're not in the thought game. You're dying, your finger's been cut off. You're about to have a heart attack. If it is not physical, it's somewhere in the mind game. And in that same sense, it is invented. There's only one thing that will cure. There's only one thing that will alleviate an invented ill. And that's an invented treatment. An invented cure. But if you're in the game, you cannot see that it takes place. Which, as long as you're in the thought game, you'll never see that there's any possible solution to anything. Every solution brings on you a problem. Every new survey, every new statistical inquiry that they do brings about such things. The same thing as every time they redo the placebo effect, they still can't answer it. And they just simply see it as a new problem, that it's even worse than we thought. That is, we're even dumber. We know even less than we thought we did, which doesn't stop anybody. It can't. There are cures for every ill in the human thought game. For every ill that man experiences that is not survival oriented, that is, if it's not life and death, then every ill, every question has an easy cure. It's metavesco. All you got to do is give your attention to it. All you got to do is make an appointment and the pain goes away. All you got to decide to do is, if you get good at it, you don't even have to bother to call a doctor and waste your energy dialing the phone or mashing a button. You just decide, all right, I'll call a doctor. That's it. You're cured. Don't send any money to Oral Roberts. You've saved all that money. You don't have to see a psychologist. It's cured. All it takes is attention. What does it take to be more conscious? Same thing. Oh, crap. You didn't have to end on that, did you? No crap to you. End it.